Corona.
There are two main activities that this lesson plan will focus on. First, students, after they do now, will kind of have a chance to review the content that they learned yesterday, which was theme. This provides a kind of starting point and jumping off point as we get into our discussions of thesis statement, and as students are introduced to that concept, they'll be able to link that to the previous content related to theme. So our first activity is a review of theme, but it's kind of in a high interest way. Hopefully, at least. As a class, we'll be watching a couple public safety or public service announcements that I've downloaded off of YouTube. I found that these videos are a really great way to get students feeling successful with the concept of theme, since they really have clear messages that they're trying to send. And sometimes, it takes a little digging, but most of the time students are able to get these pretty quickly and pretty effectively. Students feel good about this. It also is a way to scaffold up, especially for ELL students, as it's a highly visual way of teaching the concept.
It looks like rain again today.
Afterwards, students will be asked to imagine they have a friend who hasn't seen any of these public service announcements. They'll be asked to boil down the theme, the message of these videos into about one sentence, just one sentence that they would tell their friend if they had to, and about what these videos were about. I'm going to use this because essentially what the students are doing is they're creating a thesis statement. They don't even know it yet, but they're creating kind of a really basic thesis statement. So I'm using this as a sort of inquiry activity for them to transition eventually to our intro to new material. The second activity, and the main one for this lesson plan, focuses on refining what a thesis is, while also exploring how different cultures respect and remember the previous generations. We'll be doing this today by exploring the poem Lineage by Margaret Walker, analyzing the themes, and crafting a first draft thesis statement in response to a given question. After a brief and highly visual biography of Walker, I'll distribute copies of the poem, and I'll read the poem aloud once, so students, especially ELLs, can hear how a proficient reader reads. Then I'll have a student, or students, depending, read the poem aloud for the class. I will then direct each group to answer a final discussion question. After reading the passage, what does the poem have to say about the influence of grandmothers? How do you know? Students will again have 5 minutes to discuss and then share out with the class. I'll be giving feedback and guiding the discussion as necessary. based off of the discussion and the notes they took earlier, as well as the model thesis statements they have, students will then be asked to answer the final discussion question about the influence of grandmothers. Incidentally, this poem and question are taken from the January 2000 Regents, so it's Regents aligned. During this time, I'll be circulating the class to help those who need it. When students finish writing their thesis statements, they'll switch their statements with a partner and provide feedback. After this peer review, they'll switch back, and students will then make revisions as necessary, and will write their final, really first draft thesis statements on a post-it note to turn in to me. Obviously, these won't be complete, finalized thesis statements. It's more like a first step for writing a solid thesis, a building block. In future lessons, we will continue to refine these thesis statements by adding detail, evidence, etc. But as kind of a first introduction, I think it's an important base. In the future lessons, we'll also kind of be looking at examples of other thesis statements, identifying thesis statements and different types of passages, and continuing to work towards this final controlling idea, Regents essay.